Nari Kim stood alone in the corner of the training hall, watching the other cadets practice their combat moves. Her hands were wrapped in thick bandages, and her right shoulder still hurt from yesterday's accident. She pressed her lips together and tried not to think about the sound Cadet Feltar had made when his arm bent the wrong way. The Galactic Naval Academy was nothing like Earth. The walls were smooth and white, the gravity was lighter, and the air smelled clean. Too clean. Nari missed the smell of rain on dirt and the sound of wind through trees. She missed home, even though home had tried to kill her every single day. Kim, Commander. Hyosung Lee's voice cut through her thoughts. Front and center. Nari walked across the training hall. The other cadets stepped back to make room for her. They always did that now. She could see it in their eyes. The fear, the worry, the way they watched her hands like she might attack them at any moment. Commander. Lee was the only human teacher at the academy. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and tired eyes. They had been fighting in space battles since before Nari was born, and he understood things that the alien teachers did not. "How's the shoulder?" he asked. "Fine, sir," Nari said. "Good. We need to talk after class." The warning in it. The combat lesson started with basic moves. Cadet Taejon Park, another human, was her partner. He was older than Nari and had been at the academy for 2 years already. He moved carefully around her, like she was a wild animal that might bite. "Remember what we practiced?" he whispered. "Slow and controlled. Don't let your instincts take over." Nari nodded. She knew the rules. She had learned them the hard way after breaking 3 of her classmates in her first month. The academy had special rules for humans now, especially humans from Earth. They called it a Deathworld for a reason. The drill was simple. Attack, defend, counterattack, step back. The alien cadets moved like dancers, smooth and pretty. Their movements were perfect, just like the books taught. But Nari could see a dozen ways to hurt them in every move they made. Her partner today was a Kithrin named Seklos. He was tall and blue, with 4 arms and big black eyes. Kithrins were peaceful people from a world with soft grass and gentle rain. They were smart and kind, but they had never learned to fight for their lives. Seklos came at her with a practiced sword. Moving in the perfect form his teachers had shown him, Nari was supposed to block with her practice shield and step to the side. Simple, easy, safe. But when the sword came down, something inside her moved faster than her brain. She saw the gap in his defense, the way his weight shifted to his front foot, the moment when he would be helpless. Her body moved without her permission. The shield came up to block, but her other hand shot out like a snake. Our fingers found the pressure point on his neck, the place where humans had learned to kill quickly and quietly. She pressed, and Seklos dropped like a stone. The training hall went silent. Nari looked down at her fallen partner and felt sick. She had done it again. She had let Earth take control of her body, had let her Deathworld instincts turn a simple drill into something deadly. Medical Team 2, Training Hall 7, Commander Lee's voice was calm, but Nari could hear the disappointment. "Cadet Kim, with me. Now." They walked through the halls of the academy in silence. Other cadets moved out of their way, whispering to each other in their strange alien languages. Nari caught some of the words. Dangerous. Savage. Never have let them in. Commander Lee's office was small and simple. The walls were covered with pictures of old space battles and certificates from his years of service. He sat behind his desk and looked at Nari for a long time before speaking. "Sit," he said. Nari sat. Her hands were shaking, so she put them under her legs to hide them. "This is the 4th incident in 2 months, Commander Lee said. The academy. Board is worried. They're talking about sending you home." "I didn't mean to hurt him," Nari said. Her voice sounded small in the quiet room. "It just happened. I saw the opening and my body moved." "I know," Commander Lee said. "That's the problem." Stood up and walked to the window. Outside, they could see the practice fields where alien cadets were learning to fly their fighters. The ships moved in perfect formation, smooth and controlled. Everything at the academy was smooth and controlled. Do you know why they let humans into the Galactic Union? Commander Lee asked. Nari shook her head. Because we're useful, he said. We're good at fighting, good at surviving, good at doing the hard jobs that other species won't do. But we're also dangerous. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. That changes you. Changes how you think, how you move, how you see the world. He turned back to face her. The other species in the Union. They evolved on nice worlds. Safe worlds. They never had to learn to kill or be killed. They think we're monsters. Are we, Nari asked? Commander Lee said. Maybe, but we're the monsters they need when the real monsters show up. He sat back down and pulled out a file with Nari's name on it. Your test scores are perfect. Your flight training is the best in your class. You could be a great officer someday. But not if you keep hurting people. What do I do? Nari asked. Learn to be what they want you to be, Commander Lee said. Learn to hide what Earth made you. Pretend to be civilized. Pretend to be safe. Show them that humans can follow rules and play nice with others. And if I can't, Commander Lee was quiet for a moment. Then you go home. And you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. That night, Nari stood at the window of her small room and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the Deathworld that had made her what she was. There were the forests and oceans and storms that had taught her people how to survive anything. She thought about her family, living in the mountain forests where every shadow might hide a predator. She thought about her little brother, who was too young to understand why she had to leave. She thought about the promise she had made to make them proud. Tomorrow, there would be more training, more careful movements and controlled responses, more pretending to be something she was not. But tonight, alone in her room, Nari Kim let herself remember what it felt like to be a predator from Earth. She pressed her hand against the cool glass of the window and made a promise to herself. She would learn to hide her nature. She would. Learn to be the cadet they wanted her to be. But she would never forget what Earth had taught her, because someday, when the real monsters came, the galaxy would need her to remember. 3 months had passed since Nari's last accident. She had learned to move slower, think longer, and hide the predator that lived inside her chest. The academy doctor said she was making good progress. Commander Lee said she might actually graduate. Nari tried to believe them both. She stood on the bridge of the UG's Harmony, a small patrol ship that smelled like metal and recycled air. This was her first real mission outside the academy's safe walls. Captain Minho Choi, a human officer with kind eyes and careful hands, had requested her personally for his crew. Remember what we talked about, Taejin? Whispered beside her. He had graduated 2 months ago and was now a junior officer. This is your chance to prove you belong here? Nari nodded, but her eyes were watching the alien crew members. There was Jixtal, a Veltari with 6 arms and silver skin. There was Morden, a Kithrin, whose blue face never stopped smiling. There was Yelanara, a Zephyrian who looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. They all watched her back, carefully, like she might explode at any moment. All right, people, Captain Choi said, his voice carrying across the bridge. We have a simple job today. Research Station Omega-7 went dark 12 hours ago. We're going to find out why and bring the science team home. The ship jumped to faster than light. Speed and the stars outside became long white lines. Nari felt her stomach twist, but not from the jump. Something felt wrong about this mission. The captain had said it was simple, but his hands were tight on his command chair. Dr. Sa Young-yoon sat at the science station, reading reports on her screen. She was older than Nari, with gray streaks in her black hair and worry lines around her eyes. She had been studying space creatures for 20 years, and she looked scared. What kind of research were they doing? Nari asked. Dr. Yoon looked up. They were watching the Void Hunters, trying to understand their migration patterns. Nari had heard of Void Hunters in her classes. They were huge creatures that lived in the empty space between stars. Bigger than most ships, smart enough to avoid traps, dangerous enough that whole fleets turned around when they saw them coming. Are they dangerous to humans? Nari asked. They're dangerous to everyone, Dr. Yoon said. But they usually travel alone. They hunt alone. They don't work together, usually. Dr. Yoon's face went pale. That's what we're trying to figure out. The Harmony dropped out of faster-than-light speed near Research Station, Omega-7. The station was a small metal circle floating in the dark, surrounded by sensor equipment and communication arrays. But something was wrong. The station was too quiet, too dark. "No response to our signals," reported Jigstall from the communications station. "Life support is on," said Morden from sensors. "I'm reading 17 life signs inside. They're all in the central lab." Captain Choi frowned. Why would they all be in one room? Nari felt something cold move in her stomach. On Earth, when prey animals gathered in one place, it usually meant there was a predator outside. They docked with the station and went aboard in full gear. The hallways were empty and dark, with only emergency lights showing the way. Their footsteps echoed, too loudly in the silence. Nari's nose caught something strange. A smell that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was wild and alien, like nothing she'd ever smelled before. Somehow her brain knew what it meant. Danger, big danger, close danger.
"Captain,"
she whispered. "Something's wrong."
"I know,"
he whispered back. "Stay close." They found the research team barricaded in the central lab. 17 scientists huddled behind makeshift walls made from tables and equipment. They looked like they had not slept in days. Their eyes were wide and scared, and they jumped when the rescue team entered. "Thank the stars," said Dr. Raxcon, the station leader. He was a tall Altarian with purple skin and shaking hands. "We've been hiding for 18 hours. "Hiding from what?" Captain Choi asked. Dr. Raxcon pointed at a screen showing the space around the station. At first, Nari saw nothing but stars and darkness. Then something moved, and she saw them. Void hunters. Dozens of them. They floated in the space around the station like huge dark sharks. Each one was the size of a small ship, with bioluminescent patterns running along their black skin. The patterns were pulsing in rhythm, like a heartbeat, like they were talking to each other. "They've been out there since yesterday," Dr. Raxcon said, just watching, waiting. "They're not acting like normal void hunters." "How do you mean?"
"Doctor,"
Yoon asked. "They're working together, planning something. Look at their neural networks." Nari looked at the screen more carefully. The bioluminescent patterns on the creature's skin were not random. It's complex, like a language made of light. The creatures were having a conversation. "How many?" Captain Choi asked. "The 3 that we can see," Dr. Raxcon said. "But there might be more in the dark." Nari felt something stir inside her chest. The same feeling she got when she walked through Earth's forests at night. The feeling that said she was being hunted. "We need to leave," she said.
"No, we can't,"
Dr. Raxcon said. "They're surrounding us. They've been studying our defenses, learning our patrol patterns. They're smart, smarter than we thought possible." Captain Choi opened his communicator. "Harmony, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency. Evacuation." But before anyone could respond, the station shook. Hard. The lights flickered, and something metal screamed in the walls. "What was that?" Taejun asked. Dr. Raxcon's face went white. "They're inside the station." "That's impossible," Morden said. "The sensors showed them outside." "They don't use doors," Dr. Raxcon whispered. "They can phase through solid matter.
"What?"
They can appear anywhere they want." The station shook again. This time, Nari heard something else. Sound like singing, but deeper and more alien than any voice should be. It was coming from the walls themselves. "How do they hunt?" Nari asked. "They don't hunt," Dr. Raxcon said. "They're not predators. They eat space plankton and cosmic dust. They're supposed to be harmless to large life forms." "Then why are they here?" Dr. Raxcon looked at her with terrified eyes. "We don't know. This is new behavior. They've never done this before." The lights went out completely. In the darkness, Nari heard footsteps that were too heavy and too many. Something was moving through the station, getting closer to their hiding place. The bioluminescent patterns outside grew brighter, pulsing faster. The creatures were excited about something. Nari's heart started beating harder, her muscles tensed, her breathing changed. All the careful training from the academy began to fade away as something older and deeper took control of her body. "Nari," Taejon whispered beside her. Your eyes. She looked at him and saw fear in his face. Not fear of the creatures outside, but fear of her. In the darkness, her eyes were reflecting light like an animal's. I'm okay, she whispered, but she could hear the lie in her own voice. Something scratched at the door of the lab. Long, slow scratches that sounded like claws. On metal, whatever was out there knew they were inside. It was just deciding how to get to them. Nari closed her eyes and tried to remember Commander Lee's lessons about staying calm and controlled. But her body was remembering older lessons from Earth's forests and mountains, lessons about what to do when the predator found your hiding place. The scratching stopped. For a moment there was perfect silence. Then something much worse began. The wall itself started to glow with bioluminescent patterns. The same patterns they had seen on the Void Hunters outside. It's not scratching at the door, Dr. Raxcon whispered in horror. It's coming through the wall. Nari opened her eyes and watched a creature the size of a small car phase through solid metal like it was walking through water. Its dark skin pulsed with alien light. Its eyes were black holes that seemed to pull light into them. The Void Hunter looked at the terrified scientists huddled in their corner. Then it looked at Nari. For a moment that felt like forever, Predator looked at Predator across the dark lab. The creature's bioluminescent patterns changed, became more complex, more urgent. It was talking to the others outside. It was telling them about the strange new creature it had found. The creature that didn't smell like prey. Nari smiled, and her teeth looked very sharp in the alien light. The Void Hunter floated in the center of the lab like a nightmare made real. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster now, sending messages to its pack outside. The alien scientists pressed against the far wall, too scared to move or breathe. Nari stood perfectly still, watching the creature. Her academy training told her to stay calm, follow protocol, wait for orders. But something deeper and older was waking up inside her chest. Something that Earth had carved into her bones over millions of years. The hunter's black eyes focused on her. Its patterns changed again, became brighter, more urgent. It had never seen anything like her before. Nobody move, Captain Choi whispered. Maybe it will leave. But Nari could smell the creature's excitement. It wasn't going to leave. It was curious about her. The way a cat is curious about a mouse that doesn't run. The way Earth's predators were curious about anything that didn't act like prey. The hunter drifted closer to her, its massive form blocking out the emergency lights. Nari could see the details of its skin now, the way the bioluminescent networks ran like veins under its dark hide, the way its body rippled with muscle and alien biology. Behind the creature, more shapes appeared in the wall. 2 more hunters were phasing through the metal, drawn by the first one's signals. Soon, there would be 3 of them in the small lab. We're going to die, Dr. Raxcon whispered. Nari heard him, but the words felt distant and unimportant. Heart was beating slower now, not faster. Her muscles were relaxing instead of tensing. This was wrong according to everything the Academy had taught her. But her body knew better. The first hunter reached out with something that might have been an arm or a tentacle. It wanted to touch her, to understand what she was. Nari could have dodged. She was fast enough. Instead, she let it brush against her shoulder. The creature's touch was cold and electric. Its patterns flashed bright with surprise. Through that touch, Nari felt something impossible. She could sense the hunter's emotions, curiosity, confusion, and underneath it all, the beginning of something that might have been fear. The hunter pulled back and sent a rapid burst of light patterns to its companions. The message was clear, even without words. This prey is different. This prey is dangerous. Nari Taejon whispered. What are you doing? She didn't answer. She was too busy studying the way the hunters moved, the way they communicated, the way they positioned themselves in the small space. They moved like a pack, but not like Earth's pack hunters. They were too careful, too methodical. They had never learned to fight something that could fight back. One of the other scientists, a young Kithran named Dayun Shin, was pressed against the wall near the door. She was shaking so hard that Nari could hear her breathing from across the room. The second hunter noticed her fear and began drifting toward her. Drawn by the smell of terror, something snapped inside Nari's mind. She moved without thinking, her body flowing into motion like water finding a crack. In one smooth movement, she grabbed an emergency cutting tool from the wall and threw herself at the second hunter. The creature was 3 times her size and could phase through solid matter. But it had never fought anything from Earth. It didn't. Know that size meant nothing to a species that had learned to kill creatures much bigger than themselves. Nari hit the hunter's neural network, glowing veins that ran along its spine, and drove the cutting tool deep into the alien flesh. The creature screamed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with whale song. Its bioluminescent patterns exploded with pain and shock. More importantly, every other hunter in the station felt that scream through their shared network. The wounded hunter thrashed against the lab walls, its massive form crushing equipment and sending the scientists diving for cover. But Nari held on, using her small size and flexibility to stay on the creature's back. She found another neural cluster and hit it again. The hunter collapsed, its body going dark as its nervous system shut down. Nari rolled clear and came up. In a crouch, the bloody cutting tool still in her hand. Her eyes were bright and wild, and she was smiling. The other 2 hunters froze. Their patterns changed from hunting excitement to something Nari had never seen before. Confusion, fear. They were sending urgent messages to the pack outside, warning them about the small creature that had just killed their packmate. Impossible, Dr. Axcon whispered. Void hunters can't be killed by simple tools. Their biology is too advanced. They can if you know where to hit them, Nari said. Her voice sounded different now, lower, more dangerous. They're just animals. Big, smart animals, but still. Animals. Captain Choi stared at her. How did you know where to attack? Nari wiped the alien blood off her hands. I watched how it moved, how it held itself, where it was protecting. Every animal has weak spots. You just have to know how to look for them. The remaining hunters were backing away from her now. Their patterns had changed completely, no longer the steady rhythms of confident predators, but the rapid, chaotic flashing of creatures that had encountered something they didn't understand. One of them tried to phase back through the wall, but Nari was already moving. She grabbed a broken piece of equipment and hurled it at the creature's neural cluster. The makeshift weapon passed right through its phasing body, but the hunter jerked back in surprise anyway. They're not used to being attacked, Nari said, circling the creatures like they were circling her. They're used to being the scariest thing in the room. But they've never met anything from Earth. The station's communication system crackled to life. Captain Choi, this is the Harmony. We're reading massive biosignatures all around the station. The hunters are moving. Lots of them. Through the lab's small window, Nari could see the space outside the station. The bioluminescent patterns of dozens of void hunters were flashing in complex, urgent sequences. They were sharing information about what had happened in the lab, information about the small, vicious creature that had killed one of their own. They're calling for help, Dr. Yoon said, reading the patterns. I've never seen communications this complex from them before. Nari walked to the window and looked out at the gathered pack. 43 massive predators floated in the darkness, their bodies pulsing with excited conversation. They were beautiful and terrible, ancient creatures that had ruled the void between stars for millions of years, and they were all talking about her. Let them come, she said quietly. Nari Taejong grabbed her arm. We need to get everyone to the shuttle. We need to run. She looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him step back. It wasn't human anymore. Not completely. It was the look of something that had decided to hunt instead of hide. Running won't work, she said. They're too fast, and there are too many of them. But they made a mistake. What mistake? Nari smiled, and her teeth looked very sharp in the alien light from outside. They think I'm prey. They don't understand what Earth taught me, what it taught all of us. She turned back to the window where the void hunters were gathering in greater numbers. Their patterns were becoming more organized, more focused. They were preparing for a coordinated attack. Sometimes, Nari said softly, the prey learns to hunt back. Behind her, the remaining hunters in the lab pressed themselves against the walls, their patterns dim with fear. Outside, their pack was massing for war. But Nari Kim was no longer the careful, controlled cadet who had boarded this station. She was something older and more dangerous. She was what millions of years of evolution on Earth's deadly surface had created. A predator that looked like prey until the moment it decided to kill. The hunt was about to begin. And for the first time in their ancient lives, the Void Hunters were going to learn what it felt like to be the ones being hunted. Nari moved through the station's maintenance tunnels like a shadow with teeth. Behind her, the lab was in chaos. The alien scientists were trying to barricade themselves in while Captain Choi called for evacuation. But Nari knew evacuation was impossible now. The hunters had surrounded the station completely, and more were arriving every hour. She had left the others behind not to abandon them, but to hunt. The tunnels were dark and narrow, just wide enough for maintenance crews to crawl through, but they were perfect for what Nari needed to do. The hunters were too big to follow her here, and their bioluminescent patterns would give them away long before they could phase through the walls. She had taken 3 more emergency cutting tools and a portable scanner from the lab. The scanner showed her where the hunters were moving through the station, red dots on a small screen that tracked their biosignatures. Right now, there were 12 of them inside the station's main levels. 12 targets. Nari found her first victim in the station's communications room. The hunter was using its biospatial abilities to melt the communication equipment, cutting off any calls for help. It was alone, confident, focused on its task. It never saw her coming. Nari dropped from an air vent directly onto the creature's back. Her cutting tool found the main neural cluster at the base of its skull, and the hunter died without making a sound. Its bioluminescent patterns flickered once and went dark. She was learning their anatomy with each kill. The neural networks, where the key hit them in the right place, and even these massive creatures dropped like stones. It was like finding the off switch on a very large, very dangerous machine. The second hunter found its dead packmate 10 minutes later. Nari watched from the shadows as the creature examined the body, its patterns flashing with confusion and alarm. When it bent down to touch its fallen companion, she struck again. This time, the hunter lived long enough to scream. The sound echoed through the station's corridors, an alien wail of pain and fear that made the metal walls vibrate. More importantly, it carried information. The hunter's final moments were broadcast through the bionetwork to every other creature in the pack. They now knew they were being hunted. Nari smiled in the darkness. Fear was a language she understood perfectly. The patterns of the other hunters changed immediately. Their confident, methodical movements became urgent and chaotic. They started grouping together, moving in pairs instead of alone. They were adapting to a threat they had never faced before, but they were still thinking like prey. Nari found the third and fourth hunters in the station's power core room. They were standing back to back, their bioluminescent patterns dim and watchful. Smart, but not smart enough. She triggered an overload in one of the backup power cells. The explosion wasn't big enough to damage the station, but it was bright enough to blind creatures that relied on bioluminescent vision. In the flash of light, Nari struck both hunters before they could react. The fifth hunter almost got her. She was moving through the life support section when something massive slammed through the wall beside her. The creature had been waiting, had predicted her path through the station. Its tentacle arm swept the corridor, missing her head by inches. Nari rolled under the attack and came up with her cutting tool ready. But this hunter had learned from its packmates' deaths. It kept its neural clusters protected, used its bulk to stay out of her reach. For 30 seconds, they circled each other in the narrow corridor. The hunter was learning to fight something fast and small and vicious. Nari was learning to fight something that could adapt. The stalemate broke. When Nari noticed something the hunter didn't, they were standing next to an airlock. She triggered the emergency release. The airlock opened, and the station's atmosphere tried to suck both of them into space. The hunter's massive form was pulled toward the opening, but Nari grabbed onto a support beam and held on. As the creature struggled against the vacuum, Nari saw her chance. She let go of the beam and used the rushing air to propel herself directly at the hunter's exposed neural cluster. Her cutting tool went deep. The hunter convulsed once and went still. Nari triggered the airlock's emergency seal. Just before she would have been pulled into space herself, 5 down, 7 to go, but something had changed. The remaining hunters' bioluminescent patterns were different now, more complex, more organized. They were sharing tactical information, learning from each death. Worse, Nari could see new biosignatures. On her scanner, more hunters were phasing into the station from outside. They weren't just hunting her anymore. They were studying her. Nari found a quiet spot in the engineering section and checked her equipment. She had 1 cutting tool left, and the scanner was showing 23 hunters inside the station now. They had changed their tactics completely, moving in large groups, checking every shadow, sending scouts ahead to probe for traps. They were learning to hunt a hunter through the station's internal communications. She could hear Captain Choi trying to coordinate with the Harmony. The evacuation shuttles couldn't get close. The hunters outside were intercepting anything that tried to leave. They were trapped. Narit's Tachon's voice came through her portable communicator. "Where are you? We need you back in the lab."
Oh, she...
Amos answered. Amos told him she was coming back. But then she heard something else in the background of his transmission. Dayun. Shin crying. Dr. Yoon praying in her native language. Dr. Raxkin whispering about how they were all going to die. They were counting on her to save them. But they were also afraid of her. She could hear it in their voices, the same fear she had heard from her academy classmates. Fear of the monster from Earth. Nari turned off the communicator and kept moving through the tunnels. The 6th and 7th hunters were guarding the main laboratory where the others were hiding. They had positioned themselves perfectly, one watching the corridor, one watching the air vents. They were learning her patterns, adapting to her tactics, but they had made one mistake. They were protecting the lab where her people were hiding. That meant they couldn't retreat, couldn't phase through walls to escape. They had to stand and fight. Nari used that against them. She created a distraction in the corridor, an overloaded power coupling that sparked and smoked. When both hunters turned to investigate, she dropped from a ceiling vent between them. Her last cutting tool found the first hunter's neural cluster, but the second hunter was ready for her. Its massive arms swept around, catching her in the ribs, and sending her flying against the wall. Nari felt something crack inside her chest, but she rolled to her feet anyway. The hunter was advancing on her, its patterns bright with triumph. It thought it had one. Nari picked up a piece of broken metal from the floor. It wasn't sharp like her cutting tools, but it was heavy and jagged. When the hunter reached for her, she drove the makeshift weapon into its bioluminescent network with all her strength. The creature screamed and thrashed. She rode its death throes like a storm, feeling alien blood splash across her face and hands. When it was over, she stood alone in the corridor outside the lab. 7 hunters dead, 16 still hunting her, but something was wrong. The remaining creature's patterns had changed again, not just tactical communication, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like ... worship through the labs. Reinforced window. Nari could see her human crewmates watching her. Their faces were pale with shock and fear. Captain Choi was speaking into his communicator, but she couldn't hear the words. She looked down at herself and understood why they were afraid. She was covered in alien blood, her clothes torn, her hair wild. Her eyes were bright with something that wasn't entirely human anymore. In the scanner's display, she could see the remaining hunters moving deeper into the station. But they weren't hunting randomly anymore. They were heading for something specific, the station's core. It's a place where the research team had been studying Void Hunter. Biology, the place where their breeding samples were stored. Nari felt her blood turn cold. The hunters weren't just curious about her anymore. They had found what they came for. The station wasn't a hunting ground. It was a nursery. Nari ran through the station's corridors faster than she had ever run before. Her broken ribs screamed with pain, but she ignored them. The scanner in her hand showed all 16 remaining hunters moving toward the station's core in perfect formation. They weren't hunting anymore. They were protecting something. She reached the core section, just as the first hunter, phasing through the heavy security doors. Beyond those doors was the research lab's most secret project, samples of void. Hunter eggs and larvae that Dr. Raxcon's team had been studying for months. The hunters hadn't come to this station by accident. They had come to rescue their young Nari. Watch through a security window as the creatures gathered around glass containers filled with bioluminescent larvae. The adult hunters' patterns were soft and gentle now, nothing like the aggressive flashing she had seen during their attacks. They were parents protecting their children. For a moment, Nari felt something like guilt. These weren't mindless monsters. They were intelligent beings trying to save their families. Maybe she was the monster here. Then she remembered Daiyun Shin's terrified face. Captain Choi's worried voice. The 17 scientists who would die if these creatures succeeded in their mission. Nari pushed open the security door and walked into the core lab. The hunters turned toward her as one. Their gentle parental patterns immediately shifted too. Something else bright, rapid flashing that spoke of fear and anger and desperate determination. They recognized her now. The small creature that had killed 7 of their pack, the largest hunter, probably the pack leader, stepped between Nari and the larvae containers. Its bioluminescent patterns formed complex shapes that almost looked like words. It was trying to communicate with her. Nari didn't need to understand the alien language to know what it was saying. Please, these are our children. She looked at the containers.
I'm sorry.
Dozens of tiny larvae swam in nutrient fluid, their bodies pulsing with the same gentle light as their parents. They're beautiful in their own alien way, like living stars in glass bottles. I'm sorry, Nari said quietly. Then she smashed the first container with a piece of broken equipment. The sound that came from the adult hunters was unlike anything Nari had ever heard. It was pain and rage and heartbreak all mixed together. A sound that made the metal walls vibrate and the lights flicker. Every hunter in the room screamed at once, their bioluminescent patterns exploding with grief. Nari smashed the second container, then the third. The hunters rushed at her all at once, their massive forms blocking out the light. But their grief made them clumsy, their attacks wild and unfocused. Nari moved between them like water, using their size against them. When one hunter tried to grab her, she rolled under its arm and used its own momentum to send it crashing into its packmate. When another tried to phase through the floor to attack from below, she triggered an electrical overload that disrupted its biospatial abilities. She destroyed container after container, each one containing dozens of unborn hunters. With each death, the adult creatures became more desperate, more savage, more willing to risk everything to stop her. But desperation made them predictable. Nari had learned their attack patterns during her hunt through the station. She knew how they moved, how they thought, how they communicated. She used that knowledge to stay one step ahead of their rage. The last container held the largest larvae, the ones closest to hatching. Nari could see them moving inside their glass prison, their tiny bioluminescent patterns already starting to form. In a few weeks, they would have been born into the void between stars, ready to join their pack and hunt across the galaxy. The pack leader threw itself at her with everything it had, its massive form filling the small lab. Nari waited until the last second, then rolled aside. The hunter crashed into the wall where she had been standing, its own attack destroying the final container. The sudden silence was worse than the screaming. Had been Nari stood in the center of the ruin lab, surrounded by broken glass and dead larvae. The remaining hunters floated motionless around her, their bioluminescent patterns dim with shock and grief. Their children were gone. Their future was gone. The pack leader looked at Nari with eyes that held no anger anymore, only a deep alien sadness. Its patterns formed one final message before going dark forever. A goodbye to children who would never be born. Then, one by one, the hunters began to phase back through the walls. Not to attack, not to hunt, but to leave. They were abandoning the station, abandoning their mission, abandoning everything. Nari watched them go, and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had won, but victory tasted like ash and broken dreams. Through the station's speakers, Captain Choi's voice echoed from the lab where the others were hiding. The hunters are leaving. All of them. They're just ... floating away. Nari walked slowly back through the station's corridors. The bodies of the hunters she had killed were already beginning to fade, their bioluminescent patterns going dark one by one. In a few hours, there would be nothing left but shadows and memories. She found her crewmates still barricaded in the central lab. When she opened the door, they all turned to look at her. Captain Choi, Taejun, Dr. Yoon, Da-Yoon Shin, Dr. Raxcon. All the people she had saved by becoming something terrible. "It's over," she said simply. "How?" Captain Choi asked. Nari looked at her hands, still stained with alien blood. "I did what Earth taught me to do. I survived." But Taejun was staring at her with wide eyes. "Nari, what did you do down there? The bio readings from the core lab?" They showed massive trauma to the Hunter Pack structure. She didn't answer. How could she explain that she had murdered children to save adults? How could she tell them that sometimes survival meant becoming the monster everyone feared you were? "Doctor?" Yoon was reading data from her scanner. The Hunters' communication networks are broadcasting across multiple star systems. They're sending warning signals. "Warnings about what?" Captain Choi asked. Dr. Yoon looked up with frightened eyes. "About us. About humans. Now the signals are spreading to every Void Hunter pack in the galaxy." Through the lab's windows they could see the last few hunters disappearing into the void between stars. Their bioluminescent patterns were still visible in the distance, rapid, urgent flashing that carried a simple message across the darkness. "Beware, the small creatures from the third planet. They are not prey, they're death itself." Nari stood at the window and watched the lights fade into the distance. Word would spread quickly through the hunter networks. Stories of the tiny predator that killed without mercy, destroyed not just hunters, but their hope for the future. Other packs would change their migration routes to avoid human space. They would teach their young to fear the scent of Earth's children. They would remember this day as the moment they learned that the galaxy had new apex predators. Captain Choi put a hand on her shoulder. "The Academy Board wants to see you when we get back. There's talk of fast-tracking you to special operations." Nari nodded but didn't turn away from the window. Somewhere out there in the cold space between stars, ancient predators were learning to be afraid. They were discovering that evolution never stopped, that the galaxy always had room for something more dangerous than what came before. She thought about her little brother back on Earth, still too young to understand why his sister had to leave home. Someday he might join the Academy too. Someday he might face his own monsters in the dark. But when that day came, those monsters would already know to be afraid. They would already know what Earth's children were capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Nari smiled, and finally turned away from the stars. She had work to do. Reports to write, questions to answer. A reputation to build that would keep her people safe for generations to come. Behind her, the void was empty except for scattered debris and fading bioluminescent trails. The hunters were gone, carrying their warnings to the far corners of the galaxy the predators had learned to fear. Earth's daughter was just getting started.